Okay, welcome to our very first Courtside Mini, or we'll come up with a better title of that hopefully at some point. Since we launched Courtside, there have been many of you through social media or through bumping into you at tournaments asking whether certain episodes could reflect certain questions that you have about the sport. So we've come up with this Courtside Mini idea where we're going to ask one question at a time to a coach or someone else who is involved in the sport that your child's involved in, to try and get to what are their reflections around some of the questions you are asking. And we're very mindful that some of the questions don't have a definitive black and white answer. It could be someone's perspective. So we're really fortunate today to have Joe Ward with us, who was with us on episode 4 of our Courtside podcast. And the question that's been going around a month on from the 8th of September, the great final between Serena and Naomi Osaka, Naomi winning her first Grand Slam, and the media and Twitter and social media, etc., have been having all of their say about the aftermath and how Serena responded during and maybe after the match. And because Joe is heavily involved in promoting equality within the sport, we thought, what better person to ask what, 1 month after that final, are your reflections on the final, how maybe Serena responded, and also be interested to know how you viewed how Naomi responded, because in the middle of all of that, here is a very young girl who has just done phenomenal. First off, before you answer it, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me back.
Hi, my pleasure. So what are your reflections 1 month on from what was a cracking final?
I think there's so many questions within your question. So, first of all, 1 month on, isn't it amazing that it was a month ago?
Yes.
The world moves on, everyone's forgotten about it, we've got new issues in tennis, outside of tennis, etc. I think however Serena felt at the time, and however the umpire, was it Carlos Ramos, felt at the time, the world's moved on, everyone can just get back on with business. I did see on Twitter that Naomi had said that she tries not to think about it, which I think is the most tragic outcome of all of this scenario. But also I think what was really interesting, before I actually talk about the incident itself, was how polarizing it was for the people who were offering their opinions.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite characteristic of the world in general at the moment. Obviously, this is a tennis podcast, but you see what's going on in America and what's going on in the UK with Brexit, and the Serena Osaka episode was almost like a little mini version of that in lots of ways, because people were so wrong with the way they felt about it. And I had to, I'll tell you what I think in a second, but I had to stop myself taking a more extreme position than I actually felt, because people were, I think it's a natural thing to do, isn't it? You get defensive when you put your opinion forward, and then people say, no, that's a load of rubbish. Sometimes you can entrench in your opinion and you can defend it when actually you might not have felt that strongly about it in the beginning. So for my part, I think there were multiple factors at play. And if we split them down, I think you've got Serena's behaviour, and you've got the umpires, it's not behaviour, but the umpires' decision-making, okay? And I think, I can't speak for Serena, but had that been me, and had I have imploded, exploded, everything ploded in such a way as that, in such a public arena, I know I would feel regret about that.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, I was nowhere near in the same universe a player as Serena, but I've got a temper. So I certainly know what it feels like to have done that. I don't know if you've read the Chimp Paradox or seen any of that stuff, but that was full on display of chimp coming out. It's not rational. It's not, and none of us particularly want to put our irrational selves on full display and in the most public of ways like that. So I think her behaviour, this rational side of her behaviour, was unfortunate for her, for the match, because it completely wiped out any chances she had of turning it around when you are that far gone. And so as a teaching point for young children, not many of them saw it because it was on a bizarre channel over here that not many of us, the kids' families, have got. But of course, we all saw it on social media. But that's a fantastic talking point to say, look, this happens to us. Tennis is a sport that is so difficult that you often wonder if whoever invented the scoring mechanism might have been somewhat of a sadist. It's so difficult, that it does eats massive emotions, and if you don't control them, it's at your peril.
Yeah.
And that match was never going to be won from that point for Serena. Also, you look at she's increasingly moving into this space where she's defining herself as a role model.
Yeah.
As a campaigner for women's rights, for equality, for black rights, and it was unfortunate behaviour for a role model. But again, this is not me standing in judgment of her, because I've done it myself. I've just been lucky that I had like one man and his dog watching my matches, So with all of that, I think I don't think there's much that she's got to be proud of in terms of her behaviour. I do think that it's not just that match and that scoring system. She has got the burden of history on her shoulders, and
Yes.
you can almost see the weight of it, can't you? She's carrying it around.
Yes.
You saw that in that semi-final a few years ago against Vinci, where she just completely melted from the weight of all the pressure. But if you flip that and you look at the umpiring, for me, there was a massive lack of consistency, and it's not his fault that she behaved like that. But for me, the umpire is there to arbitrate, to use soft skills and nuance in the way that the rules are applied, not just to see an incident and just cold hard boom, that's a code violation. So otherwise we'd have a robot in the chair, wouldn't we? If it literally didn't need any human soft skills, we'd have a robot in the chair. And how often is the coaching rule ever enforced in Grand Slam tournaments?
Very true.
In major tournaments, ATP, WTA, I don't think it's very common at all. I don't have the stat for that, but in my experience of being a competitive tennis player, of coaching many competitive tennis players, and then obviously being a fan, you just don't see it very often. And you certainly, whenever it does come up, you most often see it preceded by some form of soft warning, where the umpire might say, look, can I can see your coach signaling to you. And because a lot of the times the coaches, coaches can't help it, because you've got this amazing relationship with your player, and on a daily basis you are a team and you get together and you help, and then you have to sit there mute whilst your player is battling out the most difficult of situations. So sometimes coaches don't even know they're doing it. Sometimes coaches cheat and they do it and whatever. But so I think that should have been preceded by a soft warning. Of course, once he went down that route of issuing a code violation for the coaching, and then she smashed her racket, well, there was no coming back from that. That had to be a point penalty, because he'd already issued. That's when he removed his ability to be flexible on the second one, because that's automatic. And then for the third one, again, I think there was room for nuance there. I think there was room for interpretation. I think if he'd have just said to her, Serena, if you keep going like this, I'm going to have to give you a game penalty, rather than just sitting there looking, he had a fairly empathetic face on, actually, and she's going at him and he's sat there and he's sort of nodding, and then boom, he just issues it. So I think I don't take a strong position either way. I think the umpiring could have been better, should have been better, and I think Serena, on reflection, I would hope she would reflect that that's not ideal behaviour for her as a tennis player or a role model.
Yeah. What were your reflections around Naomi? Was she 20, 21?
I think she showed an unbelievable maturity. Her tennis was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, how brave. She just, notwithstanding all of that extra stuff she had to deal with, but to go on court in a Grand Slam final against her idol,
yeah,
and play that kind of tennis. She didn't until that happened with Serena and Serena lost the plot, she wasn't playing tennis that was asking Serena to lose. And I think that's probably why Serena found it so frustrating. Yeah. She was going on there, she was taking on the ball, and she was just, she was brave, she was courageous, she was up the court, she was hitting winners, and then when all of this emotional stuff started coming, that never stays on one end of the court with the best of intentions. It blows up with the wind.
Yeah.
But she looked bulletproof, didn't she?
She did.
And I think we're going to see big things from her, because if she can prove herself and handle the worst of the worst situations like that, then I think some of the other stuff, even Grand Slam finals, are going to feel like a walk in the park for her.
Very much so. So as these are little sound bites, and we could go on for this forever because my mind is worrying all over the place with this, could you give us a little nugget? What can we do as parents, or what do you do? It'd be interesting to know from you as coaches. What do you do as coaches to prepare for us, our kids, for you, your players, when they're going to play someone for whom it could get a little heated at the other side? What can we do to help? Because I'm very aware that sometimes when I try to say the words "calm down" to Elijah, that has the reverse effect. What could we do?
I think for a player, I think where possible, you need to practice in conditions that are as close as possible to what you may experience on court.
Yeah.
Dress rehearsal type things, So, if we're doing stuff at our academy and the players are losing their temper, or a lot of younger players, I do a lot of stuff with the minis. They go through that sort of 9-year-old, 10-year-old phase where it rarely translates into anger, but it often translates into tears. Girls and boys, same. And it's just a frustration, it's not tears of sadness, it's tears of frustration. And I always tell them that, it's a positive that they feel like that in practice, because we're not just there on a tennis court to get better at forehands and backhands. We're there to get better at dealing with what upsets us. It's the whole comfortable with the uncomfortable thing, isn't it? Yeah. And they think it's the end of the world, and they've let themselves down because they feel rubbish and they're crying, and I say, well, look, last time we were in this situation, because there will be many more, last time it took you 20 minutes before you could come back and you were 10 out of 10, with your eyes and your body language before I fed the ball in again. This time it might only take you 15 minutes. That's a win. But I also make sure I communicate that to the parents, because it's so important that the parents don't just see it as a black and white issue. Oh, my child's crying again, let themselves down. Oh, I'm sick of this, I'm not going to let them play tennis anymore. But actually, this is 5 minutes better than it was last time. And you can, it's such a long, hard, difficult, massive, emotionally turbulent journey that if you can chip off your little tasks and your little nuggets of improvement, chip bit by bit, then you're still going in that direction.
Yeah, that's great advice.
And I also make sure that I show the children and the parents early footage of, there's a fantastic one on YouTube of Djokovic absolutely losing his rag as a young lad. And, you've got, most of the top players have got stuff out there. There's nothing, I don't think, on Nadal, because, he says himself in his autobiography, he's never thrown his racket in temper, and I just think that's just amazing. But to see some of their favourite players being fallible on a tennis court when they were younger and looking, infallible now, I think that's good. The message is, they got better, you can get better.
Yeah.
And it's a journey.
I tell you what, we'll try and find that link. We'll put it on the site when we put this podcast up, so the people can see it. That's great.
He absolutely loses it. He's only little, bless him. He can't be any older than about 9 or 10 or whatever. But he's like crying and smashed his racket, and brilliant.
I'll definitely look at that and be reminded every time our little one does it. Thank you so much, Joe. That was a brilliant. Thank you for being our first guest. So, Courtsiders, what are your thoughts on what Joe's reflected on? You can get us on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. Love to know what your reflections are after the US final between Serena and Naomi. Let's try not to get into kind of two extremes and kind of polarize it a bit. Let's explore some of the nuance. And if you do have any other questions that you'd like us to put to coaches such as Joe, then we'd love to hear from you. Hope you've enjoyed the first mini, and thank you for joining us.